Number 15. A moose can't enter a bar through a sidewalk in Fairbanks, Alaska. In the early 20th century, a law was passed making it illegal for a moose to go into a bar from the sidewalk in Fairbanks, Alaska. Yup, this was an actual problem. Apparently, this law was created because a man used to bring his moose to the bar and let it get drunk with him. But like no one would expect, when the animal would get intoxicated, it would start getting very hyper and destroy things and property inside the bar and around it. This resulted in thousands of dollars of money lost in damages. Not just that, it also ended up being a problem for the workers that had to come fix everything. They'd come to make repairs and then everything would just break all over again. So the best thing that they could think of was to ban that specific moose without saying they were banning that specific moose. All moose were banned from entering any bar from a sidewalk all over Fairbanks. Not only that, a little while later, the city officials literally decided to make a law to ban moose from walking on the sidewalk at all. This way, the infamous moose wouldn't be able to go into the bar and get drunk ever again. Because of this, the owner of the moose actually stopped bringing him to the bar. However, he ended up getting him drunk at home anyway, and the moose began destroying the property around the house instead. It seems like they maybe should have made a law prohibiting moose to get drunk in the first place, because the destruction still happened, only in a different location. Number 14. You can't eat fried chicken with a knife and fork in Georgia. Even though it seems silly to think about eating fried chicken with a fork and knife, apparently enough people in Georgia were doing it for the government to get involved. This law was passed in 1961. It specifically forbids anyone in Georgia from eating fried chicken with a fork and knife, or anything but a hand for that matter. This law is basically a joke that was invented mainly to get public attention for the town. Even though it isn't taken that seriously, one person was actually, quote, arrested for doing this in 2009. The person arrested was actually 91-year-old Ginny Dietrich celebrating her birthday at a cafe in Georgia. The chief of the police, Frank Hooper, told Ginny that it was a public offense to eat fried chicken with cutlery. After staying clear from any type of wrongdoings all her life, she had the charge on her record at 91. All because she ate fried chicken wrong. Number 13. You can't suspiciously hold salmon in England, Scotland, or Wales. In 1989, the Salmon Act was passed, making it illegal to hold salmon suspiciously. This is something that sounds crazy, but turns out this dumb law was actually set in place because of a pretty serious reason. Now, how do you exactly suspiciously hold a salmon? Well, to fish salmon in England, Scotland, or Wales, you actually need to have a license, and this license isn't very easy to acquire. It's actually fairly expensive too. So people thought that instead of getting the license, they'd just fish the salmon and hide it and take it away. When they did that, they'd hold the salmon fairly suspiciously. Although the law still exists, no one actually acts upon it anymore, so you don't have to worry about holding your salmon suspiciously in public. You can actually get away with holding your salmon however you see fit. Number 12. You can't have a sleeping donkey in your bathtub after 7 p.m. in Arizona. This law exists in Arizona and was passed in 1924. Apparently, a merchant would let his donkey sleep in his bathtub. However, when a local dam broke, the entire city was flooded. The donkey ended up being washed away with the flood while he was still inside the bathtub. Fortunately, the donkey was fine, apart from a few minor injuries, but the problem was that people had to spend a lot of time and effort trying to save the donkey. It became such a massive problem that they literally made a law where no donkey could sleep in a bathtub after 6 p.m. No one really knows what happens if they sleep in a bathtub before 6 p.m. though, as no one's been daring enough to find out. Number 11. You can't die in some towns in Japan, France, and Brazil. In 2005, the mayor of Birabita Miram made a law that forbade people that were living in his town to die. The reason why he passed this really strange law was that the cemetery had gotten full and didn't have the space for any more graves. It was also pretty expensive for the city to buy more land to build more cemeteries. The mayor also enforced some pretty strict punishments which would target the friends or family members of the person who broke the law by dying. In 2000, the mayor of Sao Paulo also passed a pretty similar law that also banned people from dying from the same reasons. In Japan, the island of Itsukushima is one of the most sacred places ever for Shinto belief. It's even a UNESCO World Heritage Site. In Shinto worship, keeping the sacred land pure is extremely important, and the priests of the shrine have always been trying to keep the land free from death. The Battle of Miyajima took place in 1555, and it was the only battle that was ever fought on the sacred island. Many people died on that day, and the island had blood basically everywhere. After the battle, the island had to be fully cleaned, and they even had to scrub some of the buildings too. Even to this day, terminally ill, elderly people, and pregnant women are to leave the land until they feel better or literally die. Number 10. Kids can't play video games for more than 3 hours a week in China. China has a history of taking drastic measures over children playing video games, and even set up a cyber curfew in 2019 where you couldn't play games during the night. It also forced players to use their real names and identification numbers so they could prove that they were over 18. Now kids play only video games from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. on Fridays, weekends, and a few public holidays. Even though parents generally want their kids to stop playing video games too much, most of them agree that this law is a little too extreme. Apparently, the law was made because the Chinese government is worried about kids getting addicted to video games. This was made clear when the government literally built some treatment centers made for people that have a quote, gaming disorder. According to the government, if the kids never play for long enough, they won't get addicted. How many hours a week do you play video games? Do you think this law should be practiced in other parts of the world? Let us know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 9. You can't walk your dog less than 3 times a day in Turin, Italy. In 2005, there were many laws being enforced against animal cruelty in Italy. Although most of them were more serious and about actual violence against animals, there was one that stood out for being a little strange. The law was that you couldn't walk your dog less than 3 times a day. Otherwise, you can get fined up to 500 euros or even more if you die or mutilate its hair. You can also walk your dog while you're on your bike, but the rules say that you can't do it, quote, in a way that would tire the animal too much. The walks need to be frequent throughout the day, but not too frequent or intense. If you're going to get a dog in Italy, make sure you're ready for the massive legal commitment they come with. Number 8. Your chickens can cross the road in Quitman, Georgia. Georgia just seems to have it out for chickens. First they banned eating them with a knife and fork, and then they went after live chickens too. In the town of Quitman, it is illegal for chickens to cross the road. If they do, they'll be asked the very important, "Why'd the chicken cross the road?" question. The main reason why the town passed this law is because the government wants chicken owners to keep their chickens in check at all times. The law just didn't want chickens to poop on the road and make a mess. It's also a safety hazard since you could possibly get into a car accident if there's a random chicken on the road, or the chicken itself could get hit. So chickens should just be on the farm, not crossing the roads. Number 7. You can't chew gum in Singapore. Everyone at one point in their lives has heard about this law that sounds like it's too dumb to even exist. This begs the question, why exactly was it made? Well, Lee Kuan Yew, Singapore's first prime minister, enforced the ban on chewing gum after the Housing Development Board had apparently spent over $150,000 every year just to clean up the gum stuck in the road, sidewalk, keyholes, and more. At first, the prime minister was actually against the ban, saying it was way too extreme. But everything changed after the mass rapid transit started running in 1987. People started sticking gum on the door sensors, which prevented the doors from working properly and caused a huge disruption. Apparently, the cost to make the whole system was over $5 billion. So when people just started sticking gum everywhere, the Prime Minister decided to literally ban it. The ban included the restriction on distributing gum, so gum stopped being important to Singapore completely. There were some expectations, such as dental gum or therapeutic gum. You could be fined up to $2,000, but the ban has partially been lifted since some kinds of gum are allowed. However, the government of Singapore to this day refuses to lift it completely over fear that the same level of littering will come back. Number 6. You have to smile at all times in Milan, Italy. In the Austro-Hungarian times, the law was made in Milan, Italy, where you literally cannot smile. Although this is a law that is extremely intrusive and controlling, the government thought that they had a good enough reason to implement it. According to them, it was made to bring more attention towards the city. The only place it wasn't a legal requirement was if you were at a funeral or a hospital. Otherwise, you could receive fines or other punishments for just not smiling. Each person that doesn't smile lets the whole city down. So make sure you're keeping your smile on your face when you go to Milan for vacation. Number 5. You can't swear in the UAE. Before you go to the UAE, make sure you keep your language in check. Swearing is punishable by fine, imprisonment, or deportation in the United Arab Emirates. Swearing, according to Article 373 of the UAE Penal Code, quote, disgraces a person's honor or modesty. This isn't only about speaking the wrong phrases loudly, it also includes offensive hand gestures as well as messages on social media. Even offensive emojis aren't permitted. Earlier this year, the British Express revealed that a man sent out an angry comment to a car dealer who had apparently wronged him. For his choice of language, he was sentenced to 3 weeks in prison. Number 4, it's illegal to flush your toilet after 10 p.m. in Switzerland. All throughout the world, people are taught to flush every time they leave the bathroom. In some parts of Switzerland, it's illegal. Well, to be more specific, it's only illegal to flush your toilet after 10 p.m. So if you have to go after 10 p.m., you can't flush your toilet. Well, you can go to the toilet and flush, but if you make noise and your neighbors complain, then the police will probably send you a fine. Obviously, this rule isn't really followed by most people. There are a lot of nosy neighbors throughout Switzerland that will keep an ear out for your flush and report you the second they hear it. Number 3, tire screeching in Kansas is illegal. People in Kansas can't screech their cars' tires because it can cause public disturbance. The law basically states that it's illegal for anyone to speed or accelerate your car in a way that makes the tires screech, even if it's accidental. So if you accidentally scratch your tires while trying to avoid something or another car, you might just get arrested. But you don't have to worry too much about it though, because in most cases the police will probably just let you off with a warning. But if you like screeching your tires and do it on purpose often, then you might end up racking up the fines. Although it's important to note that no one really knows to what extent this law has been enforced, so punishment could really be anything. Number 2, you can't share your Netflix password in Tennessee. Sharing your Netflix password with your friends or family is pretty normal basically everywhere in the world. However, in Tennessee, you literally can't because there's a law against it. Apparently, the law was made to help limit illegal movie streaming from streaming services. It's aimed at people who hack into Netflix accounts, get the owner's password, and then sell the account for a bunch of money. The law states that if you share your password with anyone who ends up violating Netflix's terms and conditions, then you will be held responsible. They've also limited the viewing to only 4 devices at a time, so you can only give out your password like 3 times? Number 1, you can't use your phone or other electronic devices in Green Bank, West Virginia. Having a phone in today's world is very important. No one really walks around without a phone anymore because they're such an integral part of our lives. However, you literally can't use one in Green Bank, West Virginia. Not only can you not use your phone, but be ready to say goodbye to your Wi-Fi and microwaves too, because nothing is allowed. The reason why this law was passed is because Green Bank has one of the world's largest fully steerable radio telescopes of all time. It's operated by the NRAO, the National Radio Astronomy Observatory. Radio signals from distant stars and galaxies are received by the NRAO telescope. The signals are usually very weak, and it could interfere with the neighboring radio signals. So the government passed a law prohibiting radio devices from being used near the observatory in 1958. A 10-mile or 30-kilometer radius around the observation tower was stated radio device free by the law. The law also required radio wave devices to be controlled inside a larger 13,000-mile zone that stretches into neighboring Pennsylvania and Virginia. Thanks for watching. Which one do you think is the dumbest law? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time on the Bad Badger.